Good morning. You're listening to Money FM 89.3. I'm Lynlee. A new ecological study has found that deforestation is a key factor driving up the risk of devastating wildfires in Borneo. The research also highlights the significance of its implications both on a local and international scale, as the forest fires in question have led to serious haze conditions that not just hit global headlines almost yearly, but also affected other countries like Thailand and Singapore. This paints a stark picture of the escalating climate crisis, with scientists predicting that the risk of forest fires will only continue to increase as climate change worsens and deforestation intensifies in the region. So, what can be done to better mitigate that increasing fire risk? To help us fit the puzzle pieces together, we're joined this morning by author of the study, Frank van Veen, Professor of Ecology and Conservation at the University of Exeter. Professor, thank you for joining us on the show. Break it down for us. What's the correlation between deforestation and climate warming versus the frequency and intensity of wildfires?
Good morning. Thanks for having me. So, as you know, these fires particularly happen in what are problem fires in the peatlands. So, this is where the fires can burn into the ground and can burn on for many months and create these horrible haze conditions. And for these wildfires to happen, there need to be three things coming together. You need to have these degraded and deforested peatlands, people that start fires, but you also need to have the weather conditions that create the conditions for those fires to be able to take hold. So you need to have prolonged drought conditions. And so the question that we were interested in is what is the risk of these kind of drought conditions happening in the future? Does the frequency of those droughts, and the intensity of them, does that change with the changing climate conditions? And the factors that can affect those drought conditions in Borneo and in those peatlands there are both global climate patterns and global climate change, but also more regional processes like forest cover. We know that forest cover can have a big impact on temperature and rainfall. Yeah, so we ran climate models that assumed that climate change happens as it's currently on track to do. But also we compared that scenario with a case where we maintain forest cover as it is now, or where forest cover is reduced. And we found that climate change by itself can increase the frequency of those fire conditions, and that deforestation adds to that. But the one thing that deforestation particularly adds to is that it creates the bigger extremes, and it's the big extremes, of course, that are the real problem. This is when the big wildfires and the bad fire seasons happen, when you get these big extremes.
Professor, from an ecological perspective, how dire are the implications of these forest fires and resulting haze issues on the larger ecosystems such as biodiversity and effects on our human living environment?
So for the natural ecosystems, the fires, even though they usually start in agricultural areas or degraded areas, they can spill over into remaining forested areas and cause further damage. And usually they cause serious deforestation, because when the fires burn into the ground, they burn the roots of the trees and everything dies, essentially. But that affects relatively small areas. It's the haze that, living in Singapore, you'll be well aware of it. What an impact that has on human health and well-being, and it has the same effect on all of the living world. Everything from the trees to the insects and all the other animals are badly affected by it as well.
So zooming into Borneo, could you describe the areas that are specifically more at risk of such fires? And has the situation worsened over the years despite continued talks surrounding the haze issue?
So the areas that are particularly affected by it are those that have been deforested, because in their natural state, these peatland ecosystems are very resistant to fires. They're very wet places. But when they are deforested and the water has been drained through canals to prepare the land for agriculture, this is where there's a chance for the soil to dry out and become flammable. So it's these large areas that have been converted for agriculture that are the main problem areas. And so there's one particular area that we are focused on, which is the ex-mega rice project in central Kalimantan province. So this is millions of hectares of peatland forest that was converted in the 1990s to agricultural land. And this is really the epicenter of a lot of the fires.
But from an agricultural efficiency point of view, are there possible workarounds for local agriculture producers? And if so, why are proposed solutions resulting only in limited results?
There are workarounds for farmers not to use fire, for example. They often use fire to clear land for to plant crops, and there are always alternatives, but they might require expensive machinery to prepare the land without the use of fire, and they may not have access to the finance to get hold of that machinery, etc. So this is a big problem. I think it's the scale of the area is makes it very challenging. And of course, it is always possible to restore the hydrology, to block the canals, to flood the land, to try and recover the forest. But you also have to bear in mind that there are lots of people that live in these areas and that make their living there. And so all these restoration activities have to happen, bearing in mind that you also have to support the people to restore to revitalize their livelihoods at the same time. And that is the big challenge.
So speaking about protecting forest cover, is there an estimated benchmark needed in order to prevent that increased risk of more fires?
I think, to be honest, any further loss of forest is going to make the situation worse. It's not like there is a kind of a threshold level that we can, up until which we can still lose further forest and will be okay. It's every bit of forest loss makes things worse, and reforestation is probably where we want to go and increase the amount of forest cover.
We are in conversation with Frank van Veen, Professor of Ecology and Conservation at the University of Exeter. We understand that you're leading a project called Kalimantan Lestari that's focused on building resilience against drought and peatland fires in central Kalimantan. So when you talk to companies, plantation owners, and farmers on the ground, what are the key obstacles preventing them from taking steps to protect the very land that they operate on?
I mean, this is very much ongoing work, so I hope we'll be able to answer all those questions in detail in the future. But these are complicated issues because you can change the physical environment and raise the water level by building dams, but that means that the crops that are currently being grown may no longer be viable on that land. So there may need to be changes in which crops are being grown, and that may mean that you need to make sure that there's a route to market for those crops, that those crops are actually viable, that people can make a living out of it, etc. So it's a complex interplay between the physical environment, the economic environment, and of course, and the whole governance environment as well. So all these factors have to play together, and it's not an easy thing to solve, even if on paper it may seem that way.
So what would it take to reverse the effects of the draining of peatlands and stem the loss of forests? Or is it even possible in the first place, given that about a third of these tropical forests have been cut down to make way for oil palm and rubber plantations over the past decades?
I think we always have to be positive and believe that everything is possible. The Indonesian government has committed to no more net deforestation or by 2030. I think that's a really good start. There is a clear commitment to try and tackle the peat fire problem. And so, even though it's not an easy problem to fix, I believe as long as the will is there, and with the help of scientists, both Indonesian and international, we can provide the evidence base. I think it is possible to fix this problem.
Okay, will, continuous efforts. We know that extensive ecological assessments and time probably is needed for proper restoration to happen. What kind of time frame are we really working against in the face of climate change?
Well, what we always say is that the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. So the time is now, really. We can't wait to take action.
All right. Thank you very much for your time today. We've been speaking with Frank van Veen, Professor of Ecology and Conservation at the University of Exeter. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Money FM 89.3